Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to talk a little bit more about money printing and national debt today. And one of the things that absolutely drives me nuts is when people refer to money printing as debt. Okay, so there's lots of people that are talking about the debt, right? People that are saying that it's a bad thing, but they continue to call it debt instead of money printing. Okay. Um, and the reason why you can't call it debt is because debt is something completely different. Okay, debt is when you actually borrow the money out of existing money, right? You borrow money out of existing money, and you're actually going to pay it back. Okay, the national debt, right, or what we call the national debt, cannot be paid back. Absolutely impossible for it to be paid back. The national debt is $35 trillion. Okay, the total debt in the entire world in US dollars is 75 trillion. Okay, so the problem here is that the United States government, right, holds 46% of all the debt in the entire world, right? And keep in mind that there's more US dollars outside of the United States than inside the United States. Okay, now the total dollars in the entire world is $25 trillion. Okay, so $25 trillion to pay a total of 75 trillion in total dollar debt. Okay, of which the United States has $35 trillion. Okay, so with only $25 trillion available in the world, it is obvious, right, that the debt can never, ever be paid back. Okay, now I've done a number of videos on this, and there's a reason for it, right? First of all, it's one of those things that have been really preoccupying my mind lately, and the things that have really brought this to the surface is number one, when they tried to sanction Russia, freeze and confiscate their money, right, that they had in U.S. dollars. The world realized that they needed to get away from U.S. dollars, right, because the United States government was weaponizing the dollar, and they were always in a position where they could confiscate anybody's money. Okay, so that was the first thing. Okay, the first sort of emergency. The second thing, right, is that Saudi Arabia dumped the dollar, right, as basically dumped the petrodollar. So the agreement for the last 50 to 75 years was that any oil that Saudi Arabia sold was going to be in U.S. dollars, right, and only in U.S. dollars. And they dumped that agreement. They said, we're not going to renew that agreement. Now, they've sort of been doing that for some time, but they kind of formalized it, and they basically have made it, aside from making it their policy, right, their standard, they've also joined the BRICS nations. Okay, so BRICS is a group that's basically counter to the G7 nations. So which is this year is being led by Russia. Okay, and the total GDP of the BRICS nations is about 40%, compared to the BRICS nations have about 40% of the world's GDP, compared to the G7 nations, which only have about 30% of the world's GDP. Now, there's also an issue of quality versus quantity, right? Because when you look at the GDP numbers, right, GDP, right, basically they count any sales, right? So when Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, when they do business transactions, they're actually moving things of value. Okay, when the G7 nations do business, right, especially here in the United States, they're not really selling product. They're pushing paper, digital paper now. So they're not actually producing. So the GDP number of the G7 nations, which is 30%, I think that is a highly inflated or cheaper GDP number compared to the BRICS nations. Okay, so this is one of those things why I think that we have to really be paying attention to this and planning our futures. Okay, so let's go back to this and take a look at this wild situation here. So the world realizes what's going on here. How did the United States get 35 trillion out of the total $75 trillion? They've been printing money. Okay, it's obvious. Now, the United States tries to like confuse and cover the situation. They'll give you this smoke and mirror show about how they smoke and mirrors illusion of how they issue debt and bonds and treasury bills and so here's the thing. They make it sound like issuing debt is necessary to printing money, okay? And it's not. It's just that they do it to kind of legitimize it, right? And consider this. Could the United States issue debt without printing money, right? So, could they issue debt to nations around the world, right? Or individuals without printing money out of the existing money, right? And the answer to that is yes. You can issue debt without printing up more money. So it is BS when they try to tell us that that issuing, that they have to issue debt so that they can, or they have to create more money so they can issue debt, and the two are kind of tied together. They need the people that understand economics and business and talk about the economy. They need to stop using the word debt. Okay, debt is when you actually borrow something and are going to pay it back. In this scenario here, where the United States government has 46% of all the debt in the entire world, right? $35 trillion, and there's only $25 trillion in existence. It's obvious that this is never, ever going to be printed back, okay? So now here's the thing. When you look at this, it's like, okay, how is this even possible? The system is designed this way, right, from its inception. The reason why money has value is because at any given point, there's not enough money in circulation to pay all the debt out there. Okay, that's how the system was designed. It's just that they've abused this to to the point where it's going to break. Okay, so the way it works is we're all capable of creating money. What we do is when we take a mortgage, right, or we finance a car, the bank takes the deed to the house or the title to the car, or if you have a gold mine and you mine gold, they'll take possession of your gold, and they use that to create money. Okay, all banks do that locally. We have an asset-based system. They take assets, they hold on to the assets, and they create money and they give it to you to use. Okay, so what happens is when the bank creates the principal, when they create the money, they do not create the interest. Okay, so for example, if you take out a loan or mortgage, right, for $200,000, you have to pay back $300,000. Okay, so the bank creates $200,000. They don't create that extra $100,000, and this happens across the board. Okay, everybody this year that, let's say all things being equal, everybody gets a mortgage for $200,000. Everybody has to pay back $300,000. That money doesn't exist. So this current generation is depending on the next generation to come in, borrow money. So there's more money is created next year. So this generation can do business with those people, more money, and use that money to pay back our principal plus interest. Okay, so that's how this system was designed. There's never enough money in circulation for the current generation to pay back the principal and interest. It depends on a growing economy. Okay, now the government has abused this because when they create money, they don't put up a collateral, right? When they create money, they just issue this fictitious debt. They really don't even have to issue it. They just do it to make it look good, right? But they could just create money and not issue debt, and it wouldn't make a difference. It's just that they do it just to make this seem somewhat legitimate. It's basically a balance sheet number to just kind of keep track of how much money the government has printed up. Okay, that's what this $35 trillion of national debt represents. That's how much money the government has printed up. Okay, so we are limited by how much debt, how much money we can create, because we have to put up actual assets. The government never has to put up actual assets. So the only thing that limits them is the debt ceiling, which they vote to raise every year. Okay, so there's really no control in place, and any other control that they put in place, they could vote to change. Right. So at one point we were supposedly on a gold standard. We never were, but we were supposedly on a gold standard. It was only supposed to be like, first of all, even at that point, it was 40%. Okay, and they cheated that anyway. Okay, so even when the amount of U.S. dollars was supposed to be backed by 40% gold, they cheated that. So it doesn't make a difference. The government can always change the rules and cheat the system. Okay, so what's needed here is discipline, essentially, right? The people running the system have to realize that printing money, right, and flooding the world with U.S. dollars is going to make countries around the world sooner or later not want to take those U.S. dollars, right? Now, another way to look at it, because a lot of times people are like, I keep hearing we're never going to be able to pay back the debt. I know we're not going to be able to pay back debt. It's because there will never be enough money in circulation to pay back the debt. But actually, hold on. I have here, I dropped it, but I have here, this represents a US dollar, okay? So what does the government do when they supposedly issue debt and print up money, okay? All they're doing is they're taking the existing money, right? And what they're doing is they're cutting it in half, okay? And they're saying, hey, I used to have, what was $1 is now $2, okay? All right? And then a year later, they raise the debt ceiling again. And what they do is they take these pieces, right? And they cut these in half, okay? And they say, wait, look at this. I got more money, right? And then they'll take these pieces the following year, right? And they'll cut these in half, okay? And now look at all the money that we have. Okay, so what the government's doing is they're taking the same money, and what they're doing is now this is $1 and this is $1, and look at all the dollars I got here, right? I got so many dollars I can't even hold on to them. And what they'll do is they'll use this to pay for things, to buy for things, right? So what they've done is they've taken the existing money and they've diluted it, and they've already received the goods and services. Okay, so the reason why you can never pay back this debt, because it's not real debt. All this number represents is how much the money has been diluted, and they have already spent it. They have already received the goods and services. Okay, so the only way that, because now what they did is when they diluted this money, what they did is they essentially taxed you, right? Because anytime the government dilutes the existing money, they reduce its value, okay, which basically means they decrease your buying power, the buying power of your money. So they have taxed you, right? Doesn't matter whether they tax you by taking money out of your paycheck, or they tax you by diluting your money, or forcing you into labor. It's all taxation, okay? So they have already taxed you, right? They've already received the goods, received the services. And how are they going to give back to you, right? Because that's what paying back the national debt would mean, right? It would mean that they would take all this money that they've diluted, right, and they would somehow put it back together and increase the value of your money, all right? Can it be done? I mean, it would probably create just as much chaos as it just can't. I mean, it can be done. We would see it as the dollar gaining value, which creates its own problems, because then all of a sudden, like, people are holding on to their money, right? Because they know that in the future their money will be worth more, okay? Which is the opposite of when you have an inflationary scenario. What happens is people hold on to their inventories, right? Because they know that their inventories will be worth more in the future. So the best thing is stability, right? Where the dollar or the money stays stable, people know what it's going to be, and they're just conducting business, normal business, without trying to play off of the inflation, right? Is the value of the money going up or the value of the money going down? The value of the money should always be consistent, okay? This way people are doing real business rather than either trying to hold on to their dollars waiting for their money to appreciate, or holding on to their inventory waiting for their inventory to appreciate, right? Because that's a situation that you run into when you have either inflation or deflation, okay? So you don't want people playing with that. You want people just conducting normal business, and in order to have normal business, you have to have the money has to have a consistent value, right? So that situation, that is why the national debt can never be paid back. First of all, there's more money, there's more debt, right? There's more debt than there's money in existence, and it will always be that way because of the way that money is created, right? Not just by the government, but also by us locally. The problem here is that the government has corrupted what would normally be a very good system, right? Where only individuals and corporations, basically all money is being created privately. That's how the system should work, okay? So, and the government should only be able to get money through their taxes, right? And not just printing money, okay? So, or if they're going to print money, don't tax us. You know, you can't. They shouldn't be doing both. But ideally, the government shouldn't be creating money. All the money should be created in the private sector, and then the government does its taxing, and or issues real debt, right? Like issues, bonds that they're actually going to pay back with interest. So those are the only two ways that the government should be able to, to make money, right? Through real debt or through taxation, not through money printing. Okay. So initially, the way the system was designed, the idea was that the government was just going to do a little bit of money printing. Okay. So when the government was doing like a minority, like a really small amount of money printing, the system worked fine, right? Because everybody believed in the system. Nobody realized that this was a Ponzi scheme, right? Where the current generation is depending on the next generation to come in to create more money so that, they can pay back their debt, their principal plus interest. So nobody realized that until the government became 46% of the system, all right? Where the government the government debt was 35 trillion out of a total of 75 trillion, okay? When this happened and the government became such a big player, everybody realized what was happening here, and everybody now around the world wants to get out of this system, right? So the BRICS nations are all working together to dump the dollar, and that's, this is like kind of like the Germans trying to fight the rest of the world during World War II, right? You're going to lose, right? So right now you got the United States trying to fight the rest of the world economically, okay? They're going to lose, okay? They can't fight the rest of the world. When the entire world unites against the economy of the United States is going to lose. Now, the scary part here is that the United States has no production. They no longer have, they're no longer going to be able to print up dollars. So what are they left with, right? Military, it's the world's changing, right? So the U.S. military is really good at attacking small countries. What we're seeing in Ukraine, not so good at fighting large countries, especially ones that are deep inland. So I fear that the United States is going to resort to the only asset it has left. It's nuclear weapons, okay? But that's how the situation is shaping up, okay? And I've done a separate video on this. I believe that the United States is 100% committed to being the lone superpower of the world, okay, at all costs. So I think the United States would be willing to engage in the worldwide nuclear war where everybody is reduced, let's say, to 20%, as long as the United States is, the boss of whatever's left, okay? And nobody would be excluded from this, right? There's no neutral nations because you can't have, let's say, United States be reduced, let's say, to 20%, but a neutral nation, let's say, like, I don't know, Sweden or something, not be affected, okay? So everybody in the world, I think, would have to be reduced to 20% so that the United States could remain the lone superpower, okay? So, like, when you think about it, I mean, when I think about how these generals and how the elite think in this country, I think that's going to be the outcome, okay? I think that's the road that they are going to take, okay? So that's but anyway, the main thing is I wanted to explain to you guys why this idea of paying back national debt, insanity, can never happen. Not enough money in circulation. There will never be enough money in circulation. All this national debt represents is how many times the dollar has been divided and divided and divided and divided to the tune of $35 trillion. Okay, and the number trillion is a tremendously large number. We should not be talking in trillions unless we're talking about like stars or grains of sand, or molecules or something. Okay, a million seconds is a week. A billion seconds is 31 years. A trillion seconds is 31,000 years. Okay, so the number trillion is a tremendous number. Okay, it should not exist when we're talking about dollars. Okay, so the way we get to $35 trillion is by continually taking the dollar, subdividing it, and now the United States uses this to say, hey, look, here's a dollar paying you, or here's another dollar paying you. Okay, and the United States has set up this system here where, because they are 46% of the total debt in the world, they've created a situation where there's really nobody bigger than the United States to come in and create more money. Okay, so going back to the analogy of mortgages, right? So if I take out a $200,000 mortgage, I'm depending on other people next year, right? Let's say everybody this year in my generation takes out $200,000 mortgages. We're depending on the next generation coming in next year and also getting $200,000 mortgages, right? Because if the next generation next year came in and they all got, let's say, $1,000 mortgages, that's not going to be enough money creation for my generation to pay back the principal plus the interest. So if I take out a $200,000 mortgage, I'm depending on more people coming in after me of the same size, okay? So when the United States is 46% of the total dollar debt in the world, there's nobody big enough to come in and create enough money. So this system is going to crash because, remember, you got this $75 trillion, right? And every year a portion of this matures and has to be paid back, right? So where's that extra money going to come from when you only got 25 trillion in circulation and there's not enough people of the same size as the US government to come in and create money? Well, the situation here is that who's going to create this money? The US government, right? So the government is the only one that can continue to print up money, right, in order to pay the debt as it matures, because if they don't print up that money, what's going to happen is these people over here, the rest of this, the rest of these people in debt here, they're going to default, right? Because there's not enough money in circulation. So these people depend on the government, right? The 75 trillion, right? The rest of this debt depends on the U.S. government to come in and create more money so that they can pay off their debts as they mature. Okay. So the United States has gotten itself in what I think is a situation that they like, because with the rest of the world depending on them to create more money, now they're in a position to say, okay, basically they're in a position to pick and choose who they're going to give money to, who they're going to lend money to, okay? So they can say, hey, we like this industry, we don't like that industry, we like this country, we don't like that country. Those guys, we're going to let them go out of business. These guys, will keep them going, we'll keep printing up money for them. So from the perspective of the United States, they're in a good position of control here, where they can decide who they're going to feed and who they're not going to feed. And the only counter to this, right, the only check is really the BRICS nations that are like, okay, we're not playing that game. We're not going to be using your U.S. dollars. And if the people in our country default, we don't care, because we're not going to allow you to enforce your asset forfeitures, right, and confiscations. So the BRICS nations are really in a position to crash this house of cards that the United States has built up, right? And when you're on the news, right, and you are hearing that a lot of generals are out there and they're saying that, that this war in Ukraine, right, they have to win it, right? They make it sound like this is like do or die, okay? Yes, it is, but not for the reason that you think, and not for the reason that that Russia has any plans to invade the rest of Europe. In fact, Russia's been pretty clear that they just want to, they just want to hold on to those areas in Ukraine that are Russian speaking, that are ethnically Russian, that I believe that were being abused, right? So, all indications are that the Russians have a very limited agenda, but the generals, right, and all these commentators on news, they're like, we have to win this war, right? It's do or die. If we don't win this war, we're doomed. Yes, they are doomed, but not because of this military win or loss in Ukraine, because Russia, has been actually doing very well despite the sanctions, okay, and they're actually leading the de-dollarization efforts around the world. So if they don't crush Russia, this system is going to crash, okay? So yeah, when you see them say, hey, this is do or die in Ukraine, we have to win that war, okay? This is what they really mean, right? They're not talking about land or people on the ground, or the physical nation of Ukraine. What they're talking about, okay, is they're trying to protect the financial system, okay? And I believe that the United States will do anything and everything to protect its most powerful asset, okay, its most powerful weapon, the U.S. dollar, okay? Anything and everything, including nuclear war, okay? Because if this system crashes, I mean, the United States forget about being a superpower, it's going to be like a third world country, more or less, okay? So anyway, a couple of things for you guys to think about. I know I've covered this in several videos, but I think it's really important information that we need to absorb, understand, digest. And here's the thing: there might be other. As you start to think about this, you might start, you might start seeing more and more things. Maybe even some things that I haven't seen. So yeah, by all means, drop some comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you all soon.